Step into that for me for the moment,
Yeah.
because you're right. I mean, for one, I guess to start it off, this notion, Democrats are now trying to act as if this was all Trump. Oh, this is Trump's idea. This is Trump's idea.
This was Biden's idea before it was Trump's.
Exactly. Right here.
But Blinken went to both Egypt and Jordan in the last 2 years and asked them to open their borders so that Israel could drive the people of Gaza out of Gaza. And, because that's the only way. This is classic counterinsurgency warfare, right? It's very much the same thing to a degree that the U.S. faced in Vietnam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your opponent that you're fighting is using asymmetric warfare tactics. They are embedded within a civilian population that by and large supports them. The only way to remove them completely, right, to defeat them, to destroy them, is to remove the population. You have to drain the reservoir from out of which they operate. Now, I'm talking in extremely inhumane terms about what is obviously ethnic cleansing and genocide. I'm simply speaking of it in terms that, military.
But it's true. I mean, you're either going to kill everybody or expel everybody. There is no way around that. I mean,
there's no other way to defeat them permanently.
Yeah, exactly.
And Israel has tried for the last 2 years, and they have not succeeded, right? They've openly admitted that Hamas has completely replenished its ranks. Of course, you killed tens of thousands, if not 100,000 Palestinians or more. And every one of those has family members who are now aggrieved and have picking up arms against you. Of course, that would happen. I said that would, not just me, of course, many other people out there right away said, that's all you're going to do, right? Unless you remove the entire population. So we know, it's a matter of public Western media record that Blinken went to Egypt and Jordan previously and tried to get them to open their borders to facilitate Israel doing this. They outright refused. But even more than that, right? This is the accelerated time schedule. On a slower time schedule, this has already been the policy and practice of every single U.S. and Israeli president since the 1960s, right? Every single one, hands down. Since Truman did videos openly talking about it during the creation. Go out there and look, Truman, Palestine. You will outright see there that he's like, well, you got two people that both want the same land. We got to move the Arabs out, to move the Jews in. That he openly declared that. It's just that previously, for all these decades, it was something being done without admitting what was being done. And it happened at a level of a house, a village, a settlement bulldozed and recolonized with settlers, right? That is the settlers process. You move the Palestinians out, you bring in more immigrants, Jewish immigrants from Europe, from the United States, even from the former Soviet Union, and you settle them in their place. That has been going on. That is an ongoing slow motion process of ethnic cleansing that no one openly admits to, that the United States and Israel have made policy for decades. Now it's simply being done on an accelerated timetable. But the initiative to do that began with Blinken and Biden, not Trump. Trump is just being more open and forceful and mafia don-like in his announcement of it, right? Will convince Egypt and Jordan to open the borders, right?
And I guess that's the question. Do you think they'll be able to do that? Jordan and Egypt told Biden outright, no, this is not something we're going to allow. This is not something that we're okay with. Does Trump have the leverage to do this?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Really? You think he does?
The Jordanian government is a complete quisling of the U.S., right? of the UK and the US, right? Completely, 100%, right? Whatever domestic political problems it will create for them, certainly the West has the screws to put to them, right? To cut their funding, everything else. And Egypt, almost as many, because to a very large extent, the Egyptian military is and has been for decades funded by the United States, right? That's why Egypt is the biggest single recipient of U.S. military aid after Israel, right? Before the age of Ukraine, right? And that the only two countries excluded from the military suspension, at least by name, in the most recent, are Egypt and Israel. So there's lots of screws there. Egypt is a very poor country. Now, it will create enormous domestic problems for them, right? The last thing that they want is another 3, 4, 5, because I want to be clear, we're not actually just talking Gaza here. The intention isn't just Gaza. It's the West Bank too. They're talking about ethnic cleansing because while the Gaza ceasefire has gone into effect, nearly unreported in the Western media is the fact that Israel has increased the bombing of the West Bank, right? In the past few weeks, right? Since the ceasefire in Gaza came into effect, and you've had the hostage exchange on both sides. And it's quite obvious. And Israeli media, Israeli politicians are now, for the first time, openly talking about annexing the West Bank as well. I mean, they're not hiding it. It's not being repeated very often in the Western media, but that is what the Israeli media is openly talking about. A recent poll showed that 3% of the Israeli population is against the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from
that sounds about right.
3%.
Sounds low.
Right?
Even sounds low.
That tells you what a radicalized population Israel has at this point, and how they are willing, right, for anything, including they're eager, if anything, to just remove the Palestinian problem as they see it once and for all, right? To claim greater Israel. Everything says it's going to happen. Trump has openly endorsed it for the first time, right? And tried to present it in the most clumsy and ham-fisted way as a humanitarian gesture. Right. And even the way he put it, after we rebuild it and the U.S. owns Gaza and turns it into the rich area, people from the area will be able to move back in. He didn't even admit we'll bring the Palestinians back, right? No, we all know what he's talking about. He's talking about the Israelis. He's talking about the Jews. So this is the first time. This is a normalization of genocide in Israel. That's what Trump is doing right now. Whether U.S. troops are actively involved, Trump has already sent 2,000-pound bombs so that they can turn the rest of Palestine into, to the forcible part of the forcible displacement of the rest of the Palestinian population, so that they'll be able to level the remaining faster with 2,000-pound bombs. He also promised another 7 to 8 billion in military aid, again, just in the last week, to Israel. So they're restocking, they're rearming, resupplying, the Israeli military in preparation for that. And everyone wondered, why did Netanyahu suddenly accept a ceasefire that he had previously refused, right, with a hostage exchange deal from the Biden administration? Why did he suddenly, with just rolled over and accepted that ceasefire that he had rejected, a year earlier? And I said right at the time on this show, there's a carrot and a stick, and we don't know what the carrot and the stick were, right? We still don't know what the stick was, but the carrot was, you give me the ceasefire that I promised now for my inauguration and make everything look nice, and then I'll fully support the forcible displacement of Palestinians from Palestine.
How is that going to work? I mean, we're talking, I mean, this is going to create a hornet's nest, to put it mildly.
Absolutely. Right. A lot of people are saying that it's unworkable, so that it's not going to happen. I would say, if not unworkable, then extremely still, obviously incredibly problematic, but it is going to happen, right? Now, recall that in the last year, what we have seen is the vast majority of the population of the Gaza Strip, including the entire population of the city of Gaza, driven out of Gaza into a tiny corner of the Gaza Strip right along the Egyptian border. That already happened. Millions of Palestinians were already displaced. It's not that much harder to do it again, particularly when you've already destroyed Gaza. Now, it will be more difficult, of course, for the West Bank, and they're not right up against the Egyptian border. That's where Jordan comes in. But if you don't think the process can be repeated there, then, I mean, Hamas at least fought back. I don't even know if the Palestinian Authority will fight back. They've never fought back before. Why would they do it now, the Quislings, right? How would it happen? It would happen exactly like has already happened since the October 7th attacks. The only difference being
the Egyptian border,
knocking down of Egypt and Jordan's, unwillingness to lower their borders up until this point.
Just wow. I mean, you are right. They have been able to effectively force people to move from point A to point B.
Millions of people they forced out of their homes. They've already done it. It has already happened.
So the only difference this time around is just the Egyptian border is open, and those people move and keep moving into Egypt.
Yes.
Oh, this is going to create chaos.
People keep saying it's not workable. I'm like, well, I mean, it's not going to be pretty, but it has already happened. The only difference being is that the Egyptian border wasn't open to drive them through.
Now, does the Jordanian government, I've heard some people make the point of saying if Jordan does this or Egypt does this, their governments are going to collapse.
It's possible.
So you do see that as being an outcome, potentially.
Sure. It will create enormous, first, political outcry between the portion of their populations that actually support the Jordan. Remember, there's still large numbers of Palestinian refugees from the first Nakba in Jordan and Egypt, right?
It's like 60%, some insane number. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, millions, right? I mean, they're already there. Second of all, there are sympathetic parts of both of those countries to the Palestinian people. Third of all, even the people that aren't theoretically sympathetic to the Palestinians being driven out of their homes and lands, now you're going to saddle them with millions of Palestinian refugees, right? Competing with them for jobs, lowering low-wage jobs, housing, all sorts of things, creating more food insecurity to portions of the population in those countries that are already on a day-to-day level of stress of living hand to mouth, making their economic situation even worse because they'll have to compete with millions of more of refugees. So yes, that is the classic recipe that the governments of Jordan and Egypt have feared. I mean, look at both of those countries have incredibly young populations, right? There's been a huge boom of people, right, in the under 30 age, under 30 demographic, right? Huge numbers of young people compared to previous generations, right? And large numbers of those are effectively unemployed. It's a huge struggle, right? Part of the struggle for Egypt, for the Egyptian economy, and to a lesser but similar degree for Jordan as well. And that's before, right, you add millions of more refugees into the mix, right? And keep in mind, the Egyptian government that's in power now, Sisi, they hate Hamas.
Right.
They don't like Hamas, right? They
Muslim
themselves overthrew an actually popularly elected Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood government, and they regard Hamas as just the Muslim Brotherhood across the border, as Islamists, right? They hate them. They don't want to protect them, but they also don't want their country inundated with Hamas in even greater numbers, even more. Along with the refugee population that comes with them. But again, the U.S. has huge leverage over Egypt. The only thing probably standing in the way of this right now is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia
is saying they want a separate
state.
state.
Financial backer of the Egyptian government, and they have put out very strong statements against these ideas, but with Trump's, and outright saying that there would be no normalization of relations with Israel, which had been the big plan of the Abraham Accords for the first Trump administration, right? They've outright said now that will not happen until there is an internationally, meaning U.S. and Israeli recognized Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. The two-state solution. Meanwhile, these words, the idea of a two-state solution has just completely dropped off the Israeli political board. They don't even talk about it anymore, right? They don't even accept that that's a possibility, right? Much less the one-state solution where Israelis and Arabs live together, right? That's not the solution. Now there is only a final solution. Right, because that's all they're talking about. A one-state, but the only state is Israel. Right, that is. And if you don't think that there aren't plenty of people in Israel that see the potential collapse of the Jordanian government and the Egyptian potential destabilization of the Egyptian government, just making things easier for future acquisition of Greater Israel, because they regard Jordan as part of their territory as well. Right. Yeah. All the way
the river to the sea.
Syria and everywhere else. They've recently taken more land in Syria as their own since the overthrow of Assad by Al Qaeda there. Right. The woke Al Qaeda that the West is, or Turkey in particular, but the West is supporting there, or at least tacitly accepting there for the moment. All of this is going on, right? And everything is in flux in the Middle East. It is a time now that the Syrian government has disappeared and Trump has come back on the stage of possibility. Things can radically change, right? And at the same time, we have an Iranian government that is, compared to its predecessors, perhaps excessively passive, and wanting to an excessive degree to avoid conflict with the United States and Israel. We've already seen, Hezbollah,
if not destroyed, damaged.
Very damaged, very damaged. You can say that they fought the Israeli military to a standstill in southern Lebanon. Yes, but at a huge cost, a cost to their leadership, a cost to their political levels. And now, according to reports, the Lebanese military is taking up positions that were previously held by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Now, to what extent that is really true and Hezbollah is actually gone, I cannot say. But I do know that didn't happen at all after the ceasefire that ended the last such conflict against Hezbollah in the 2000s. And all indications is that Iran is less willing under Pezeshkian to, come onto the line to defend the axis of resistance, be it in Hezbollah, be it in Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq and Syria, be it the Houthis, the Ar Salah movement in Yemen. Right. This government, And part of that, it might very well be the strategic partnership that they recently signed with Russia. They know if they have the time, right? If they have 5 years for Russia to help, build them a powerful air defense and electronic warfare network, that they'll be in 5 years, in a much better position to withstand Israeli and U.S. long-range strikes than they are now, but they need that time. And if the Palestinian don't think that Israel sees Syrian government gone, Iran in a period of, shall we say, reconsolidation, right, and building up their own defenses. And if you think Israel doesn't see a window of opportunity here to remove the Palestinian problem within a time frame, I mean, these things are all expediting calculations.
They're expediting their plans. That's what seems to be taking place.
Yeah, window of opportunity.
One last thing before I let you go, Zelensky. It is clear at this point that Donald Trump wants Zelensky gone. I mean, at the point where he's saying we need to have elections, Zelensky comes back and effectively
said, "Trump didn't say that. Trump didn't say that.
Trump didn't say that he wanted elections." And
Kellogg said that he wanted them. No, there's a difference. There is a difference. I'm sorry, there is. But I believe that Trump probably would like to get rid of Zelensky. But Zelensky immediately started suddenly agreeing to negotiations with Putin and other things that he hadn't before, and still denying, right? If we suddenly have elections in Ukraine, that will mean destabilization and we'll lose our military and everything else.
He's saying the military is going to have to come back to make votes. He's saying that this is purely just a Russian plan to destabilize Ukraine. And apparently he's asking for some kind of assurances for economic and military, if indeed they have these elections, which I under no circumstances understand. When the U.S. was having its civil war, we still had elections. Zelensky is effectively saying he would have to remove the martial law declaration in order to do this. Okay, this seems to be nonsense to me. He just doesn't want to have elections.
So one, yes, Russia is quite confident that this would further destabilize the regime in Kiev. It would, right? There's no question it would, right? Yeah. So yes, Russia would like that and is encouraging that. And that's certainly part of Russia's calculation when they push that Zelensky is illegitimate to actually sign any settlement, right? Both are true. Right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. One, yes, there is wiggle room that any future, if Zelensky signed anything. And two, having elections would destabilize Ukraine, right? They have tenuous control of a lot of their territory to begin with, right? Yet, would it be impossible to hold elections? No. Would it be extremely politically and even militarily problematic, socially problematic? Yes, it would, right? It would be difficult. It would be problematic. And then, of course, you have the very likely result, if there's even a blind, deaf, and dumb donkey on the ballot next to
Zelensky,
that the blind, deaf, and dumb donkey would be elected instead of Zelensky. So, yeah, but there are multiple reasons. Personally, the fact that they are at an existential war, and this is certainly an existential war for the Kiev regime, and if the Kiev regime keeps on fighting too long, for an independent state of Ukraine itself, right? And to expect them to have elections, right? They've never had democratic elections to begin with since 2014. They've already lustrated, pogromed, and banned the entire non-Maidan political representation of the country, right? All the political parties of East Ukraine have been banned. All the media voices, critical of the Maidan, all the critical media has been banned in the country. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is undergoing a very real pogrom, right? There's nothing democratic going on in that country since 2014, which is why I don't understand why all the fuss about Zelensky being illegitimate now because his term expired. That regime has always been illegitimate as far as I'm concerned. But yes, it would be extremely problematic to hold elections. And this is both a tactic and a legitimate legal concern by Russia. It's both.
I guess I get that. But
Zelensky suddenly starts agreeing to things that Trump wants, you won't hear about elections coming out of the U.S. again. Right?
Go away.
This is leverage, right? If he doesn't play ball with what Trump wants, then yes, the U.S. will push for elections, right? If he plays ball, then you will hear the whole Kellogg, there should be elections in Ukraine rhetoric dropped. That's the way this works.
I guess I'm looking at this from a different angle, though. If a blind, deaf, and donkey would win, put up against Zelensky, then that means the public wants something else. Meaning, in the last poll, I think it was Gallup, it was like 50-something% of the public wanted the war to stop, even if it meant giving up territory for the war to stop. And so you get Zelensky, who they're calling messianic, who they're calling delusional, now trying to get 18 to 24-year-olds with a special contract that they would never get to fulfill to get into the war. So well, I look at this and I say, okay, well, the public wants something else.
A stealth conscription of young people is what is being built up in stages, right?
But they know that it's a year contract, and you have some cases where these people last for 4 hours.
Look, if the Maidan regime holds an election, the other people on the ballot will be Zelensky, the Banderite general of Ukraine, a committed ideological Banderite, Poroshenko, the former candy oligarch president of Ukraine, possibly Yulia Tymoshenko, right? The West Ukrainian populist gas princess godmother, right? These are the potential opponents they will face, because you won't see any political representatives of the majority of people of East Ukraine, because all of their parties have been banned. So yes, you will destabilize Ukraine. Yes, you'll get rid of the problem of Zelensky, but you might get someone actually far more committed and capable like Zelensky, whom in previous polling, when matched up against Zelensky in Ukraine, was accepted, right? It all depends on what options you offer the Ukrainian people. If you're not offering them a peace candidate, then they will still choose Zelensky over Zelensky, and that's not necessarily better for this conflict, for Russia, or for the people of Ukraine. But there's that blind, deaf, and dumb donkey again. When I say that they'll vote for anyone and anything, democracy is always management, right? I mean, look at in the U.S. You are presented with the choice between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and pretended like that's somehow democracy. That's not, right? That is always, it is not only selecting the lesser of two evils, it is selecting the lesser of two incompetent idiots, right? So it wasn't a choice. It's always about management. There is no choice, right? And
it wasn't a choice.
If you actually held elections under the Kiev regime, it would and the regime withstood the political destabilization pressure of holding an election, which is not clear, then it would likely result in someone like Zelensky taking power, which would be no better and probably worse, because Zelensky would probably make better decisions to maintain the Kiev regime than Zelensky himself would, because Zelensky is a madman, and I mean his own people call him delusional, and he grates on everyone. Don't think that getting rid of Zelensky will necessarily make the situation in Ukraine any better, as long as that regime is still, the Maidan regime is still in place.
Mark, man, I always appreciate talking to you, Mark. Your explanation of the stuff is fantastic.
Sorry for the black pill. Sorry.
No, man, you're perfectly fine. I just want this war to be over with. And,
we all do, but don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath.
The man himself, Mark Sleboda, international relations and security analyst. I want to get the sound right. You can find Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find him on his YouTube channel at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda. And you can find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, man, thank you for this. Always appreciate your breakdowns. I really do.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.